Hello, I'm Olive from 7th Memory here for Devlog number 4. In this video, I want to go over more of the general outline of the story that we've developed and go into more of the world building that we've started to fill out. If you haven't already, make sure you check out my video from 2 weeks ago, where I go over a lot of the first chapter of our story in detail. I'll still provide a quick summary now though, just in case. In the first chapter of our story, Zara, the protagonist, decides to investigate this terrible conspiracy that they've heard about. They end up exploring this old abandoned fort, trying to find these missing people. They make their way in, end up fighting the big bad boss, this terrible evil wizard, and ends up getting absolutely wiped. Zara is thrown out into the river, floats downstream back to town, and that's where they're found by Jay, who's the first non-Zara person to join the party. Jay is an energetic little brother character, this bard, and the two of them set out together to go back into the fort and find one of these missing people, Jay's brother. They get to the end, find the bad guy once more, and this evil wizard unlocks the magic inside of Jay's brother, turning him into this big, terrible monster. The party is forced to fight him, and then they return back to the town. Now, that's where I stopped a couple weeks ago in the last video, but since then we've developed a bit more of the story, and I wanted to go over where it goes from there, without getting too far as to not get into spoilers. Jay and Zara now want to go and find this bad guy, who seems to have, of course, run off. So they decide to go on a big cross-continental adventure. They decide to go from their little town, now named Dorman, to the big capital city. They want to do some research, find out who this bad guy is, what's up with the magic, all that, get themselves new gear, etc. While doing all of this journey, and when they actually get to the city, they end up learning a bunch of the lore of the world, which I'll get to in a second. And as part of this quest, as part of their travels or in the capital, they also find this circus, which is a big side quest of sorts that ends up spanning the whole game. We want to have something like this circus because it's a good way for us to introduce all sorts of little mini games, just keep things fresh, sometimes keep things lighthearted, but also introduce new characters and show more of this dynamic between Zara and Jay. Because of course, Jay will see a circus and get excited, while Zara would want to just stay on track. The circus and its ringleader will later have more of its own lore, but for now we've been focusing on developing how this fits into the greater story. After spending some time in the city, the party will finally be able to find themselves some leads, follow the trail, and find the big wizard. This time, however, they're ready, and they absolutely kick the guy's ass. That ends that first chapter of the story, but of course the story doesn't end there. Actually defeating the big evil wizard ends up leaving the party with more questions than they have answers, because of course it's going to end in a "you'll never stop us all, there are more to be found," etc. kind of cliffhanger. So they end up learning about, as they continue the research, hearing about this expert on magic who's been holed up in the mountains. They decide to set off on a big adventure, make their way there, and meet the chef. And the chef has just been quietly hiding out in this big wizard's tower up there. And the party ends up getting them to join the party. We introduce another minigame, so on. They also meet the next bad guy there, who, instead of just being this almost stereotypical big bad evil wizard who just wants to unlock the magic in people by torturing them or whatever, our next bad guy is this crazy cult leader who wants to use this magic that he's now trying to unlock in other people to just grow his following and become more and more of this idol. They fight him, beat him up, that's another arc. And then the third arc after that is when they hear about another bad guy in this nearby fishing town who wants to use magic for almost body modification and upgrades, stuff like that. That's where the party meets our fishing minigame character. We do have a little bit more beyond this. We planned the next two bad guys after that, but I feel like for now anything more would be spoilers and is very, very subject to change. This stuff, though, we think is pretty likely to happen as it ends up tying into some of the characters that we've already developed. So that's the general story so far. Now let's get into some of the world building that we've done so far. So we do have a bit of basic map so far. And the way this map is laid out is that we have this big lake in the middle of the continent and a river that branches off to the south and to the northeast. To the south of this river is the little town of Dorman, which is where the beginning of our story takes place, where Zara and Jay are from. Following the river up, that leads over to the capital city, which is where this next branch of our story would take place. If you go to the very north of the continent, you can see there's mountains, which is where the chef is holed up, and there's a volcano. It's a fantasy world, there's gotta be a volcano. We'll find a way to make it relevant later. To the very east, there is this beach area, a little fishing town, and then to the west is mostly a barren wasteland of area that was magically damaged from the war, and that doesn't really get a lot of visitor. Some of our basic history is that we had this very big war happen in the continent around 500 years ago, where magic was locked away after a legendary hero put an end to the war. Zara is said to be a descendant of this hero, supposedly. So they take a lot of inspiration from this. They want to be the next big hero of the land. But of course, because 500 years ago was the last time anyone really saw magic, it's not even known if it's real. Most people think of it as a legend. The other thing that we have going on is this religion that we've been developing. The religion is based on the 7 major gods of both nature and various things in society. For example, there's a god of war named Asgar, and another god of crops, nature, fertility, etc., that kind of thing, named Badashus. So little by little, we've been starting to develop some of the world building around these characters. So there's these 7 big nature and society gods with one god to rule them all. And there's one character who's sort of this pope-like character, supposedly chosen by the major god, and who's actually been alive and kicking since long before the war. His very long lifespan is seen as a miracle on behalf of this incredible major god, which of course helps with his mandate to be the leader of the religion. If he's the god's chosen who can live forever, why wouldn't he be the pope? Well, that's all for world building. So I've talked about the major religion, the outline of our world map, and this big history-shifting war that determined the outcome of magic for years and years to come. Thank you so much for watching. Max will see you next week for another devlog. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any, and have a good one.